What if the most chaotic franchise in the NFL is about to make the wildest offer in league history? Not to a quarterback, not to a superstar free agent, but to a coach who might demand the keys to the entire kingdom. That's the rumor exploding around Cleveland right now. Insiders are saying the Browns are preparing to throw what analysts are calling stupid money at John Harbaugh, the kind of check that makes other coaches stare at their contracts and feel personally disrespected. But the money isn't even the craziest part. The real shock is what Harbaugh is reportedly asking for in return: total control. Not shared power, not collaboration with the front office. Complete authority over every football decision, including the power to fire the general manager on day one. When you hear something like that, you have to pause and ask, why would a Super Bowl winning coach need that much control just to walk into Cleveland? The Browns have cycled through coaches like seasons, and every time the story ends the same way. Big promises, big press conferences, and then everything collapses under the weight of ownership interference. That's the reputation Jimmy Haslam has built, an owner who can't resist stepping into football decisions, even when it keeps blowing up in his face. So when Harbaugh's camp reportedly started drawing lines in the sand, people around the league didn't see arrogance. They saw a man who knows exactly what Cleveland has been for 2 decades. But here, where this story takes a turn nobody expected, multiple reports are claiming Harbaugh's demands are connected to one name: Shedeur Sanders. Yes, the same quarterback half the fanbase believes is the future and the other half isn't sure about at all. The narrative floating through Cleveland media right now is that Harbaugh might not even want the job because of Sanders. Some insiders went as far as calling it a low blow that Harbaugh was supposedly spending his weekend watching film on other quarterbacks instead of the Browns' young signal caller. On the surface, it sounds like a rejection before the relationship even starts. But what if everyone is reading this completely wrong? What if the money, the control, and even the film study rumors are all part of a much bigger picture? Because buried in the same conversations where people were panicking about Harbaugh ignoring Sanders, another detail slipped out. Harbaugh was reportedly interested in drafting Shedeur just months ago. That changes everything. Suddenly this doesn't look like a coach running away from a quarterback. It starts to look like a coach trying to build the exact environment he believes that quarterback needs to survive in Cleveland. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in on all the latest NFL drama, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the video reach more people who love this content just like you. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another update, reaction, or storyline as it unfolds in real time. I also want to hear from you in the comments. What do you think about Shedeur Sanders' performance and the Browns' collapse? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. And don't forget to share this video with friends who follow the NFL. Your support truly keeps the channel moving forward. And that's the part nobody is saying out loud. Maybe this insane price tag isn't about ego. Maybe it's about protection from the same dysfunction that's ruined every Browns era before this one. If Harbaugh walks in without total control, he becomes just another name on the long list of Cleveland casualties. But if he walks in with real power, real authority, and real backing, the entire future of the franchise and Shedeur Sanders could change overnight. The question isn't whether Cleveland can afford Harbaugh. The question is whether they can afford not to give him exactly what he wants. John Harbaugh isn't walking into this situation like every other candidate who's ever chased the Browns' job. That's the part people keep missing. Most coaches interview hopping to be chosen. Harbaugh is moving like a man who knows he's the prize. And when you look at his track record, it makes sense. This isn't some hot coordinator with one good season. This is a Super Bowl winning head coach who built a culture in Baltimore that survived for more than a decade, through roster changes, quarterback transitions, and front office drama that would have buried most teams. That kind of resume changes the entire power dynamic. Cleveland isn't interviewing Harbaugh, Harbaugh is interviewing Cleveland. Analysts close to the situation keep repeating the same phrase. The deal breaker won't be the city, the roster, or even the quarterback. It will be control. How much freedom is Jimmy Haslam actually willing to hand over? Because everyone around the league knows the truth. Brown's ownership has a reputation for offering input, which is the polite way of saying they can't stop touching the stove even after getting burned a dozen times. And Harbaugh has zero reason to accept that. He watched what happened to coaches before him, talented football minds who walked into Cleveland full of confidence and walked out a few seasons later looking defeated. The pattern is always the same: mixed messages from the front office, last-minute roster decisions, and a chain of command so blurry nobody knows who's really in charge. Harbaugh isn't desperate enough to step into that circus unless the rules change completely. That's why the demands sound so extreme. The reports about him wanting the authority to pick his own staff, control every roster move, even potentially replace the general manager, aren't just power plays. They're survival tools. Harbaugh knows that in Cleveland, half measures get you fired. Shared control becomes no control, and he's not risking a Hall of Fame legacy to be another name chewed up by dysfunction. There's also something deeper driving this confidence. Harbaugh has options, real options. Multiple teams with cleaner situations and more stable ownership are already circling. He doesn't need Cleveland. Cleveland needs him. That flips everything. Instead of begging for a chance, Harbaugh can dictate terms, and the Browns are in a position where saying no might mean watching the one coach who could fix this mess walk straight to a rival. And let's be honest, Cleveland fans have heard big promises before. They've seen culture changers come and go. But Harbaugh is different because he's already proven he can build a winner without perfect conditions. He developed Lamar Jackson when half the league didn't believe in him. He reinvented his offense midseason and made it work. He survived front office politics in Baltimore and still kept the locker room united. That's why this moment feels different. Harbaugh isn't just another name on the interview list. He's a reset button for an entire franchise, but only if Cleveland is brave enough to hand over the controls they've been clutching for years. And that's where the story takes another turn, because all of this power, all of this leverage, suddenly circles back to one uncomfortable question about Shedeur Sanders. The moment that really set Cleveland on fire wasn't even about money or control. It was one single report: the claim that John Harbaugh was spending his weekend watching film on Jackson Dart and Cam Ward, but apparently not Shedeur Sanders. That one line hit Browns fans like a punch to the chest. In a city desperate to believe their young quarterback is the future, the idea that the dream coach might already be looking past him felt like betrayal before the relationship even started. Local media reacted instantly. Analysts called it a low blow. Talk shows turned into panic sessions. The narrative formed overnight: Harbaugh doesn't want the job because he doesn't believe in Sanders. If he's studying other quarterbacks, that must mean he's planning to replace him. And in Cleveland, where hope is always fragile, that story spread faster than any official statement ever could. But rumors in the NFL are rarely as simple as they sound. The same insiders who pushed the film study angle quietly admitted something that didn't fit the outrage. Months ago, during the draft process, Harbaugh was reportedly a bit interested in Shedeur Sanders. Not dismissive, not uninterested. Actually intrigued enough to consider using real draft capital on him. That detail completely changes the temperature of this conversation. So why would a coach who once saw potential in Sanders suddenly ignore his tape now? That's the question nobody slowed down to ask. The easy answer is rejection. The smarter answer might be the opposite. Coaches don't rewatch film on players they've already evaluated 100 times. They study the unknowns, the alternatives, the options they haven't fully measured yet. Dart and Ward represent new puzzles. Sanders might already be a file Harbaugh feels he understands. Still, perception matters more than logic in moments like this. To a fan base that's been burned by false promises, the optics looked terrible. It fed the fear that Cleveland was about to become a backup plan again, the place coaches use as leverage before choosing somewhere safer. And once that fear took hold, every rumor started to sound like confirmation. There's also the uncomfortable truth about how Sanders is viewed nationally. Some see a poised leader with elite accuracy and pedigree. Others see questions about ceiling, arm strength, and whether he can survive behind a shaky line. Those debates were already loud before Harbaugh's name entered the picture. His reported film choices just poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning. But here's the twist. What if the entire narrative is backwards? What if Harbaugh's silence on Sanders isn't distance, but strategy? Coaches often reveal less about the players they actually value most. Public praise creates expectations and pressure. Private planning stays quiet. The fact that nothing definitive has leaked about how Harbaugh truly feels might be the biggest clue of all. And while Cleveland argues over tape rumors, the real story keeps moving underneath. Because the film study drama isn't happening in a vacuum. It's tied directly to those massive demands for money and control, demands that suddenly start to look less like avoidance and more like preparation for something much bigger. Everyone keeps treating Harbaugh's film choices like a verdict on Shedeur Sanders, but what if it's actually the opposite? What if the reason Sanders isn't on the screen is because Harbaugh already finished that chapter months ago? Coaches don't operate like fans refreshing highlight reels. They evaluate, decide, and move on. By the time the public is arguing over clips, real decision makers are already 3 steps ahead. Think about how the draft process works. Harbaugh had access to full reports, private workouts, interviews, medicals, the kind of information the rest of the world never sees. If he was genuinely interested in Sanders back then, that file didn't just disappear. It's sitting in his mind, complete with strengths, flaws, and a plan for how to develop him. Rewatching the same tape wouldn't teach him anything new. Dart and Ward, on the other hand, are fresh variables. Different systems, different traits, different risks. If Harbaugh is weighing multiple jobs, he has to study the quarterbacks tied to those jobs. That doesn't mean Sanders is out. It means Harbaugh is doing what elite coaches do, comparing every possible path before choosing one. The public saw neglect. Harbaugh might just be completing the puzzle. There's another layer most people ignored. When a coach truly wants a player, he rarely broadcasts it. Praising Sanders publicly would only lock Harbaugh into expectations before he even sits at the negotiating table. Silence keeps leverage. Ambiguity keeps options open. In NFL politics, the quietest moves are often the most intentional. And let's be honest about Cleveland's situation. Sanders isn't walking into a finished product. He's stepping into a franchise that has chewed up veterans and rookies alike. If Harbaugh takes this job, his entire legacy will be tied to whether he can make that environment functional. Of course he's cautious. Of course he's studying alternatives. That isn't rejection, it's responsibility. The media framed the film rumor like a breakup text. In reality, it might be more like Harbaugh double-checking the exits before committing to the hardest renovation project in football. Sanders doesn't need a coach who accepts him out of convenience. He needs one who chooses him after seeing every other option on the table. There's also the uncomfortable truth that development matters more than raw talent. Harbaugh built Lamar Jackson into an MVP after half the league wanted him to change positions. He reshaped offenses midseason and made them work. If any coach has earned the right to take his time evaluating a young quarterback, it's him. So flip the narrative for a second. Instead of asking why Harbaugh isn't watching Sanders, ask why he once considered drafting him at all. Instead of assuming distance, consider preparation. Instead of seeing doubt, imagine a coach quietly designing the exact system he'd need to make Sanders succeed. Because the real story might not be about avoidance. It might be about Harbaugh making sure that if he says yes to Cleveland and to Shedeur Sanders, he's doing it with his eyes completely open. And that leads straight into the next uncomfortable truth. The control Harbaugh is demanding might be the very thing Sanders needs to survive in this city. For years, the word control has scared Cleveland fans because it usually meant more chaos, not less. But with Harbaugh, control doesn't sound like a power grab. It sounds like a rescue plan. Every failed era in Brown's history shares the same fingerprint. Too many voices, too many agendas, nobody truly in charge. Coaches preaching one philosophy, front offices chasing another, ownership hovering over all of it like a referee who can't stop blowing the whistle. Harbaugh is looking at that history and saying one simple thing: not again. The analysts who know this organization best admitted something brutally honest. The Browns have only really succeeded when ownership was forced to step back. The one stable season people always point to was 2020. The year outside access was limited, and the building actually felt like a football operation instead of a committee meeting. That wasn't luck. It was structure. And structure is exactly what Harbaugh is demanding. Total control means one clear chain of command, one voice in the locker room, one philosophy guiding the roster instead of a tug-of-war between analytics departments, executives, and owners with opinions shaped by talk radio. In most cities, that would be normal. In Cleveland, it would be revolutionary. And think about what that means for Shedeur Sanders. Young quarterbacks don't just need talent, they need protection from organizational noise. They need a coach who can tell the front office no when someone suggests another quick fix. They need a system that doesn't change every offseason because a different executive fell in love with a new idea. Harbaugh's control isn't about ego, it's about creating a stable ecosystem where a quarterback can actually grow. Right now, Sanders is caught between two timelines, the franchise desperate to win immediately and the reality that development takes patience. Without a strong figure at the top, that pressure crushes young players. Harbaugh's demands could be the shield Sanders has never had. There's also the defensive side nobody talks about enough. Cleveland already has an elite unit led by Myles Garrett, a group ready to win now. That kind of foundation gives Harbaugh room to build the offense the right way instead of chasing miracles. Control would let him balance those timelines instead of sacrificing one for the other. Critics hear "fire the GM" and imagine chaos. Supporters hear it and imagine clarity. Harbaugh isn't threatening to burn the building down. He's asking for the right to renovate it without someone changing the blueprints every week. And deep down, Browns fans know this is the crossroads they've been avoiding. Keep the same structure and hope the result magically changes, or finally hand the wheel to someone with a proven map. Control feels scary only because Cleveland hasn't trusted anyone enough to deserve it. If Harbaugh walks in with real authority, Sanders wouldn't be just another experiment. He'd be part of a deliberate plan built by a coach who has already developed stars under brighter lights and louder doubts. That possibility is what makes this moment different from every coaching rumor before it. Because maybe the most radical idea in Cleveland isn't giving Harbaugh control. It's admitting they should have done it years ago. Most national conversations about Cleveland sound like eulogies, cursed franchise, endless dysfunction, another coach about to fail. But underneath the jokes and scars, there's a version of the Browns that almost nobody outside Ohio is paying attention to. And that version looks a lot more attractive than the stereotype. Start with the defense. Myles Garrett isn't just good, he's the kind of generational force coaches dream about inheriting. An edge rusher who changes game plans by himself, who can erase mistakes on the other side of the ball with one violent snap. Around him is a unit stacked with young, inexpensive talent that already plays at a playoff level. For a coach like Harbaugh, that's half the battle already won. Most rebuilds begin with chaos on both sides. Cleveland begins with a defense that can carry a developing offense. Then there's the draft capital everyone glosses over. The Browns quietly hold multiple first-round picks thanks to smart trades, the kind of ammunition that lets a new regime reshape a roster without tearing it down. That flexibility means Harbaugh wouldn't be trapped into one path with Shedeur Sanders. He could add competition, weapons, protection, whatever the evaluation says is missing, instead of pretending one young quarterback has to solve everything alone. Cap space tells the same story. Cleveland isn't locked in a financial prison the way many struggling teams are. There's room to maneuver, room to fix mistakes, room to surround Sanders with veterans who actually fit a coherent plan. Harbaugh wouldn't be inheriting a sinking ship. He'd be inheriting a workshop full of tools that just haven't been used correctly. And then there's the part nobody likes to admit. Expectations are finally low. After years of off-season hype turning into December misery, the pressure gauge has reset. A new coach wouldn't be walking into Super Bowl or bust. He'd be walking into a city desperate just to see competence, discipline, and a direction that lasts longer than a press conference. For a builder like Harbaugh, that kind of runway is gold. Even the locker room culture, often mocked from the outside, isn't the wasteland people imagine. Veterans respect Garrett, young players have flashed real promise, and the roster isn't filled with unmovable egos. The problem hasn't been talent, it's been alignment. Too many pieces without a single architect. Put all of that together, and Cleveland starts to look less like a trap and more like an unfinished project with expensive materials already on site. Elite defense, draft flexibility, manageable finances, a quarterback with upside rather than a washed veteran with baggage. That combination is rare, even in better organizations. Harbaugh knows this. He's not evaluating the Browns through the lens of late-night punchlines. He's looking at the ingredients. And the ingredients suggest something dangerous, not a quick fix, but a real foundation. Which is exactly why the next comparison matters so much. Because another team just proved how fast the power dynamic can flip when a coach understands his leverage. If Harbaugh's demands sound outrageous, the NFL just gave everyone a live demonstration of how fast outrageous can become normal. Look at what happened in Jacksonville. Liam Cohen, a coordinator with zero head coaching experience, told the Jaguars he wasn't interested. Within days, the franchise fired its general manager, reopened the door, and suddenly Cohen was back, this time with the power to help choose his own front office partner. A first-time coach reshaped an entire organization before he ever called a single play. That wasn't chaos. That was leverage in action. Now compare that to Harbaugh. If a coordinator can force that kind of reset, imagine what a Super Bowl winning coach with a Hall of Fame resume can demand. Harbaugh isn't bluffing when he asks for authority. He's following a playbook the league has already validated. Teams are terrified of missing on the one leader who can stabilize them, and that fear flips negotiations upside down. Cleveland sits right in the middle of that pressure cooker. They've spent years chasing quick fixes, burning through coaches and executives, while the rest of the division built identities. Harbaugh represents the opposite of that cycle, a long-term architect instead of another bandage. The problem is architects don't accept half-built blueprints. They want to draw their own. And the Browns don't have much room to play hardball. If they hesitate, Harbaugh can pivot to New York, Tennessee, or any number of openings with cleaner reputations. Every rival call increases his price. Every rumor about another team studying quarterbacks strengthens his hand. That's how leverage works. Silence becomes a weapon. The Jacksonville example also exposed something deeper about modern NFL power. Front offices used to hire coaches. Now elite coaches interview organizations. They ask who controls the roster, who decides contracts, who actually has the final word when things get messy in November. Harbaugh has lived long enough in the league to know those answers matter more than salary. For Shedeur Sanders, that precedent is enormous. A coach with real leverage can protect a young quarterback from the same tug-of-war that ruined others before him. Instead of a GM chasing headlines or ownership reacting to weekly losses, one voice sets the course. Development becomes a plan, not a debate. Critics call this dangerous, too much power in one set of hands. But Cleveland's history shows the opposite danger. Power spread so thin nobody is accountable. The Jaguars chose clarity over comfort. The Browns are being asked to make the same choice, only with far higher stakes. Harbaugh understands the moment perfectly. He doesn't need Cleveland to prove his legacy. Cleveland needs him to escape theirs. That imbalance is why the demands keep growing and why the front office keeps listening instead of laughing. And while fans argue about film rumors and draft boards, the real battle is happening at the negotiating table, a battle over who will control the next decade of Browns football. The answer to that question will decide not only Harbaugh's future, but Shedeur Sanders as well. After all the rumors, the leaked film stories, the arguments about money and control, the situation really comes down to one uncomfortable question. Are Harbaugh's demands a warning sign or a lifeline? Cleveland has spent decades confusing noise with progress. Every new coach arrived with promises, every front office talked about culture, and every era ended the same way. Blame, resets, and another young quarterback left standing in the wreckage. Shedeur Sanders is now at the center of that same storm. Some fans see him as the answer, others as another gamble. But the truth is simpler. No quarterback survives in Cleveland without structure above him. Talent alone has never been enough in this city. The organization has to change before any player can. That's what makes Harbaugh different. He isn't offering hope wrapped in slogans. He's demanding conditions. Conditions that protect a quarterback instead of exposing him. Conditions that stop ownership from panicking after 2 bad Sundays. Conditions that turn development into a process instead of a weekly referendum. The film study drama distracted everyone from that core reality. Whether Harbaugh watched Sanders last weekend doesn't decide the future. What matters is whether he's allowed to build an environment where Sanders can actually grow, an offensive identity, a stable staff, a front office that pulls in the same direction. Without that, Cleveland will draft another name, buy another jersey, and repeat the cycle. And maybe that's why this moment feels bigger than one coaching search. It's a test of whether the Browns have finally learned anything. Do they cling to control that hasn't worked for 20 years, or hand it to someone who's already proven he can win? Do they treat Sanders like another lottery ticket, or like a young quarterback worth investing real structure in? Harbaugh's price sounds extreme only because Cleveland has been operating on discounts for so long: discounted authority, discounted patience, discounted plans. The bill is finally due. Either pay it or accept more of the same. Fans deserve honesty now more than hype. If Harbaugh walks away, it won't be because of Shedeur Sanders. It will be because the organization chose comfort over change. And if he says yes, it will be because Cleveland finally admitted that the problem was never one player, one coach, or one season. It was.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.